The delicious aroma of roasted Thanksgiving turkey lingered in the air, masking the sharp, metallic scent of blood that was pooling on the floor. With every second that ticked by, the panic inside the assailant grew. They had to come up with a plan because the body that was lying on the floor had to go. Looking around the small apartment, they found various items that could help with the disposal process. Walking into the kitchen, they looked down into the sink and then looked back up, settling their sights on the switch located on the wall. Reaching over to it, they flicked it on, and immediately, the garbage disposal came to life, loud and clear. Bill Nelson was the type of man who liked to live larger than life. Originally from Texas, he was a big man who wore red cowboy boots, a huge shiny gold belt buckle, and loved driving his bright red Corvette. During the 1980s, Bill had been a pilot in Laredo, Texas, flying back and forth across the border that separated Texas and Mexico. Although it appeared that flying was just a hobby to Bill, it was soon discovered that his passion for flying was not so innocent. After landing his plane one day after returning from Mexico, Bill was arrested when a search of his plane found that it was full of marijuana. After this, Bill was convicted for drug smuggling and spent 4 years in the federal prison. But now, in October of 1991, Bill was 56 years old. He was out of prison and had finally settled himself down in Costa Mesa, California. There, he liked to spend his time at the local bar, playing pool and drinking a nice cold glass of beer. And that is just what he was doing one day, when a woman that he had never seen before walked through the door of the bar. This woman was definitely exotic looking, which made her even more attractive. She had dark skin, long curly hair, and it was obvious that she was used to getting a lot of attention from men. Her name was Omaima Aref. Omaima was a tiny Egyptian woman, and as Bill would soon find out, she was pretty good at playing pool, too. Despite their age difference, though, which was 33 years, Bill was instantly attracted to her and interested in seeing where a friendship might lead them. Omaima's early life was not easy. She was born into a poor Egyptian family near the border of Sudan, and according to Omaima, her father was extremely violent and abused her both physically and sexually. When her parents finally divorced, Omaima and her mother moved to a village in Cairo known as the City of the Dead, which is a very old, run-down area that comprised of thousands and thousands of ancient tombs and mausoleums. Many of the people who lived there actually lived inside the tombs, sharing the tomb with the deceased to whom the actual tomb belonged. And while living there, when Omaima was 17, she met an American man that had been working in Cairo for a large oil company. She knew that this man was her ticket to a life that was far better than the one that she was currently living. And so, they started dating, and then before long, Omaima married the American man, and once his job in Egypt was finished, they moved back to the United States together, specifically to Texas. But, unfortunately, not long after settling in the United States, their relationship completely fell apart, which ultimately led to their divorce. At only 18 years old, Omaima now found herself alone in the United States with no real skills to speak of and a poor grasp of the English language. Omaima wandered around for a little while as she tried to figure out what to do with herself when she eventually made her way to California. This was a place where her unique looks landed her occasional work as a model. This wasn't Omaima's preferred way of earning money, though. She found it much easier to meet men in bars where she would attract the ones who were willing to take care of her. And if that didn't work, she just stole from them when they least expected it. When Omaima met Bill Nelson, she knew immediately he was exactly what she was looking for. He just gave off the aura of wealth that Omaima was craving. And within weeks of meeting one another that day in the bar, Bill and Omaima were like crazed lovers who couldn't get enough of each other. Bill liked her so much that he asked her to go on a road trip with him to Texas and Arkansas so that she could meet his family. Of course, Omaima was more than willing to go because she would do anything to get her hands on everything Bill had. And as they were driving east on Interstate 10, Bill suddenly pulled the car to the side of the road and stopped. He then turned to Omaima, put her hand in his hand, and asked her to marry him. They had known each other for less than 1 month when they drove into Phoenix and got married right after Bill's sudden proposal on the side of the highway that day. After they were married, they just carried on with their road trip. When Bill and Omaima arrived in Texas, his family could not believe that he had married this woman. But even though they did not agree with his decision, they could not deny that the couple appeared to be extremely happy together. Bill and Omaima only stayed with Bill's family for a few days before it was time to head back to California. So they packed up their stuff, said their goodbyes, and headed home. Jose Esquivel was lounging around his home in bed, fading in and out of sleep on Sunday, December 1st, 1991, when, just after 9 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of someone pounding on his front door. He jumped out of bed to look out his window, and when he looked outside, he seen that there was a red Corvette sitting in his driveway. He didn't know anyone with a red Corvette, and he didn't feel like answering the door either, so he ignored the knocking and went back to sleep. But about 4 hours later, the frantic pounding on his front door started again. However, this time, Jose answered the door, and when he did, he found himself face to face with Omaima Nelson. They had dated briefly a year earlier, but she had suddenly taken off and he hadn't heard from her since. But now, here she was, standing on his doorstep. As Jose stood there looking at her, he could see that Omaima was covered from head to toe in bruises and what could have been spatters of dried blood. As soon as he opened the door to her that day, Omaima was anxiously pleading for his help. She looked him dead in the eye and told him that she had murdered her husband Bill, explaining that on Thanksgiving evening, Bill had tied her up and assaulted her. She said that she had struggled as hard as she could to get loose, and when she finally managed to free herself, she grabbed the lamp off of her bedside table and smashed him over the head with it. Then, when he was down on the ground, she stood over him and stabbed him repeatedly with a pair of scissors. She just continued to stab him until Bill was dead, and then when she realized he was dead, she panicked. She then told Jose that she spent the next 2 days cutting him up and putting pieces of his flesh down the garbage disposal in the kitchen sink, and then putting other pieces of his body into plastic trash bags. Omaima pleaded with Jose to help her. She told him that Bill had $75,000 in cash, and that if he helps her get rid of the body, he can have the money and 2 of Bill's motorcycles. Jose stood there in stunned silence, but somehow managed to keep his calm. He told Omaima that he needed to go and get his truck so that he could transport the body and then load these motorcycles. Explaining this to Omaima, he told her to wait there at his house and that he would be back in about a half an hour. And so she waited nervously, pacing around Jose's house, waiting for him to come back. And that is when the police knocked on the door. Jose had no intention of helping Omaima, and when he left the house, he had driven to the nearest payphone where he called the police and told them everything that Omaima had said. He then hung up the phone and waited for them to show up at his door. When police questioned Omaima, she was clearly distraught, completely denying that she had told Jose that she had killed Bill or even offered him anything to help dispose of the body. But this whole scene didn't make any sense to the police. Omaima was a mess, and she was at Jose's house. Obviously, something prompted Jose to call the police, and so the police examined the red Corvette sitting in the driveway. From the passenger side window, they could see a black plastic bag sitting on the front seat. When they opened the door and reached into the bag, they were shocked to find that it was filled with blood-soaked newspapers and meat, which later turned out to be human internal organs. That was all the police needed to bring Omaima down to the station for questioning, where she again firmly denied telling Jose anything about killing Bill. She paced back and forth in the interview room for nearly 4 hours as detectives interrogated her. When asked about the bag of internal organs in the car, she blamed it on Bill, saying that she believed her husband may have killed somebody. She claimed Bill had violated her and other women as well. And then, Omaima began to ramble incoherently about hallucinations she was having. And then, as if she was suddenly possessed, she began to speak of herself in third person. When the interview was complete, Omaima was taken to the hospital for a pelvic examination to determine if she had been assaulted like she had claimed. However, the exam found that there was no evidence of any assault. Investigators then went on to search the apartment she shared with Bill Nelson. And that is where they found a scene unlike any they had ever seen before. First, they found a small drop of blood on a door. Then, they found a large pool of blood that had been absorbed by the carpet. And as they made their way into the kitchen, there was absolutely no way they could ever have been prepared for what they were about to find. Remnants of the Thanksgiving feast that Omaima had prepared was still sitting out on the stove, but when the investigators took a closer look at the food, they seen that this feast was no feast at all. Inside the deep fryer, they found Bill's severed hands, which had clearly been deep fried. The garbage can contained parts of his hip, along with turkey and cranberry sauce, and inside the freezer, they found Bill's cooked severed head behind some frozen vegetables. Bill's downstairs neighbor told police that they had heard the garbage disposal running for hours, all weekend long. Omaima had been carving up Bill's body and shoving him down the kitchen drain into the garbage disposal, trying desperately to get rid of him. When investigators pulled the sheets off of the bed, they found the mattress was soaked with so much blood that it bled through to the box spring beneath it. They also found a broken lamp, and it too was covered in blood. It wasn't Omaima who had been tied up and assaulted. It was Bill who had been tied up and murdered. When Omaima was brought back to the interrogation room, she finally confessed to killing Bill. She claimed, however, that she had no recollection of it at all, saying, "I don't remember how I killed him. All I remember, I get up, like I said, and I find that he's in a trash bag. I wish I knew how I killed him, though. Something inside me told me that I had to do it, like demons." Again, Omaima rambled at length about taking drugs and alcohol. She gave cryptic answers in a feeble attempt to seem mentally ill. She told detectives she had hallucinated and had been contacted and instructed by mysterious beings that were covered in blood who told her that Bill must die. The medical examiner determined Bill Nelson died of over 25 blows to the head, most likely from the bedside lamp. She then repeatedly stabbed him with a pair of scissors. Omaima's trial began on December 2nd of 1992. Her attorney argued that she had been beaten and abused by Bill Nelson since the beginning of their short marriage. She blamed her actions on a history of abuse dating back to her childhood, and that when she was 7 years old, she endured a female circumcision. This was a dangerous ritual designed to control a woman's sexuality, resulting in lifelong, very painful intercourse. Omaima claimed Bill demanded sex from her on a daily basis and often complained that she wasn't performing to his expectations. And as a result of his assaults, she decided it was best to castrate him and dispose of his genitals. Omaima was a very deeply disturbed woman who believed that she had descended from ancient Egyptians, and these ancient Egyptians spoke and acted through her when she killed Bill Nelson. Omaima had confessed that she had cooked Bill's ribs in the oven with barbecue sauce and ate them. She claimed they tasted sweet, just like I like it. The Egyptians believed that if a body is scattered in different places, it would not be able to ascend to the afterlife. Omaima wanted to make sure that Bill would not make it to the afterlife, because if she made it there, she did not want him to be there. The prosecution, however, argued that the medical exam of Omaima's body proved that there was no evidence of assault, and the evidence actually showed that Bill was the one restrained, not her. On January 12, 1993, Omaima was found guilty of murdering her husband, but without proof of premeditation, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision of the first-degree murder. She was instead convicted of second-degree murder and handed a sentence of 27 years to life. In 2006, she was denied parole when the commissioners found her unpredictable and a serious threat to public safety. She was denied parole again in 2011 when the parole board determined she had not taken responsibility for the murder and would not be a productive citizen if she were freed. Omaima will be eligible for parole again in 2026. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you for watching, and please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps me out, which is always very much appreciated. And I will see you again later.